Hi everyone, I'm back with another Diablo 4 video. This time I want to talk about the reset dungeon button that has been disabled. So you might have seen this already in this beta retrospective that Blizzard has posted like 2 weeks ago. And they've also discussed this again in the last developer live stream. So I want to go into details of this and what I think about it, because this has been like one of those most discussed topics lately. So I'm going to give you like some input. So what you have seen in the beta was that people were farming the same dungeons over and over. In particular, for example, Annika's Claim. This one was in the Malnox Stronghold. And it was really great to farm because there are a lot of elites in the first part of the dungeon in particular, where you have to defeat certain Animus carriers, and there's like random elites on top of that. So you can do something like, I don't know, 8 or 10 elites or so in a matter of like a minute or two, and then reset the dungeon and go out again. So this was like one of those common farming strategies that people were doing here with those Ice Clan guys. And it was just like a very repetitive, kind of a boring grind in my opinion. I've tried it for a little bit as well with some of my characters just to like, gear up a little bit or just see how that is. And I gotta say, I'm very glad that this is not incentivized at all. On the other hand, I think that this is also mostly like a beta problem in general, because in the real game you have a lot more things to do than in the beta. In the beta we were capped at level 25 and we had nothing to do, nothing to grind, nowhere to go, and we couldn't do like renown objectives in the other zones and these kind of things. In the real game, first of all you have to complete the campaign with your first character, and then you have to do renown grind up to renown 5 in all of the 5 regions, which is like, multiple times more of renown grind than what we were basically able to do in the beta. So I think that realistically farming the same dungeon over and over would have never really been a thing, at least for like realistic, like efficient progression scenario, basically. Unless we're talking about leveling an alt really quickly and efficiently, then maybe, but yeah, practically the reset dungeon button was mostly like a relic of the development, and is exactly also what they said in the Upstate live stream. So they actually explained that this was something they introduced very early in development. It was just kind of like there, and then the beta came around and people abused it, like no tomorrow, basically, with just farming the same dungeon here over and over and over. And obviously this is like really bad design, so we don't really want that, I think. Maybe some people enjoy this kind of monotonous grind of the same thing over and over, but realistically, Diablo 4 is not designed that way. And I don't think that developers would want you to feel forced to do that just to be effective. And the thing is that later on, you're also going to have the nightmare dungeons that you can actually reset whenever you want with the sigils. So in case you're not aware how that works, you can find or craft those nightmare sigils. They are like an itemized version of a dungeon, so to say, and they allow you to run a certain dungeon once. And this is also like how they reset. So you see this here, for example, these are the sigils. So you activate them, and then a certain dungeon, for example here, Sunken Ruins, or here, Cultist Refuge, they become the Nightmare Dungeon, and you go there and complete it, and then you activate another sigil. So realistically, for like endgame farming, you're gonna try to stack up multiple of the same sigils, and then just run the same dungeon back to back, most likely, so that you minimize the travel time and optimize your farming efficiency. And this is probably how you're gonna do it. And this low-level dungeon farming stuff is just not really gonna be a thing because you're busy with other objectives. And in addition to that, they also clarified in the dev livestream that dungeons are still resetting even without the reset button. So they want you to still be able to run dungeons multiple times if you want to, but they don't want you to chain essentially half-completed dungeons all the time, just because some of them are a bit more efficient with like the layouts and the elite distribution, like this Annika's Claim example, so that they can kind of like balance out dungeons as a whole, instead of trying to be careful that every single part of every single dungeon is exactly balanced, which is obviously not really a realistic target to have. So like this, you can make sure that, for example, maybe the first part of the dungeon is really good, but maybe the second part is like, not as efficient, basically, to kind of even it out. And this can just create a bigger variety of different dungeon experiences, and that is great in my opinion. And the way this works now is that if you finish a dungeon, it will automatically reset once you leave after a certain timer has elapsed. I'm not sure if you're going to see that timer, but they said that it's going to be, I think, something like 60 to 90 seconds or so after you TP out of the dungeon and after you've finished it. And I believe a bit faster in groups actually. And if you don't finish a full dungeon, it will be a bit slower. So I guess you might have to wait like, a few minutes or something like that to actually go back in. And you can potentially still do these kind of like farming strategies at low levels. Again, only under those scenarios where you don't actually have anything else to do, like Renown. But maybe you can still find those, dungeons that are like really efficient and then farm, the first part like Annika's Claim. And then maybe do something else in the downtime where you have to wait. So you can go to the town and you can sort out your inventory, maybe, grab a coffee, and maybe you can also go out of the dungeon and do a second dungeon that is nearby that is also quite efficient. And then you can just get like alternate between 2 dungeons, or you can do a dungeon and an event. And this is actually something that I found quite interesting. So if you look at the Diablo 4 map here, this is the Fractured Peaks map right now, and we hide all and we just take dungeons and events. There's actually one particular spot that we can identify here, which is Dead Man's Dredge, which has an event right next to the exit. So I went through the entire map here and tried to find some of those dungeons that are located next to some of those outdoor events. And you see that, yeah, they are usually quite far. So, even here, this is like, probably like a 20-30 second run or so. This is too much. Maybe Forbidden City would be something here with this event nearby. But Forbidden City is not really a dungeon that anyone would want to farm, I guess. But there are some of those cases, especially down here, Deadman's Dredge, I found was a very efficient dungeon to farm. Lots of easy monsters, not really a big boss that anyone would have trouble with. And also has Animus carriers for extra elites in the dungeon, for example. And there was this event spot right next to it. So this could actually be a new strategy now where you farm this dungeon instead of Annika's Claim, and you go out with the Leave Dungeon button, you complete the event, which will most likely spawn more often than not by the time that you finish a dungeon and come back out again. And I know that in the last beta it was bugged very often and you couldn't actually finish it, but I guess that has been fixed. And you can just go back in the dungeon and you can get, some extra stuff between your dungeon runs. So maybe this was already like one of the best strategies, and no one really did it because, we had this reset dungeon button. But I think this can actually be very effective as well. I guess another example worth trying might be Lost Archives. I think some people are also farming this for like lots of XP. I'm not sure about the elite density and the drops, but you also have an event right there. I think these are slightly misplaced. I think these icons should be like up here and up here. So you see this like right before the entrance. But yeah, outside of that, you don't really have that many events like close to like a good dungeon, in my opinion, to farm. I mean, generally those dungeons are relatively balanced, I would say, but sometimes they have like, really dangerous monster types that are hard to deal with, or they have, like a really like difficult boss fight that many builds might not be able to finish very quickly if you don't have really high single target damage and these kind of things. So this is definitely something worth trying. At least I'm gonna try this strategy and let you know how it goes in the next beta weekend in May. In any case, I'm quite happy that the reset dungeon button is gone, and I think that at least for the final release, not necessarily for the beta weekend, you also won't really notice its absence very much. So those are my 2 cents on the topic. Let me know what you think about it, and if you have any other feedback to share or something, then yeah, just go ahead and share it in the comments. Hope you like this one, and see you guys next time.